also had the Talon Manual 2 that came out, which is floating around, which again has gone into a tizzy. But there are areas which is extremely nebulous and very difficult to define. So we'll have to find ways and means to see how these legal provisions within the country can be utilized so that you empower the law enforcement agencies, because the LEAs can only start taking action if there is a legal violation that happens, which can be pinned onto individuals or into organizations to be able to take it ahead. So the legal provisions will have to be looked at. And more importantly, what was also applied earlier, which Dr. Amar talked about, I think we don't really have a regulatory mechanism which is regulating what is happening in the internet domain. Yesterday, I remember traveling with one of the colleagues of the association here itself, and he correctly mentioned that if you go to take a SIM card or a mobile connection, you're required to give all your Aadhaar cards, you need to give your recognitions, you need to give your address proof. But if you have to go down and get a domain name put down on anybody's this thing, you really require no such methodology or no such requirements exist in the regulatory mechanism for you to be able to give your identity. So it leaves it open to misuse, it leaves it open for the wrong elements to exploit, to be able to carry out the illegal capability. So if this be the case, I think the policymakers will have to make regulations and take out legal provisions where you can draw the balance between protecting the privacy of the citizen and ensuring that the security of the organization is addressed. So I think this subtle balance will have to be looked at. We'll have to look at our regulatory mechanisms coming in. We will also have to look at as far as the international bodies are concerned, that if the economic center of gravity is shifted to the Asia Pacific, there is an exemplary need that India be part of the policy-making bodies of the world, which is going to govern subsequently the internet and the cyber domain. So I think correctly I've seen that the Ministry of Information Technology has started off this thing of preparatory meetings for the ICANNs, preparatory meetings for the IETF, so that you have people from our own domain sitting in these policy-making bodies subsequently, so that policies are framed which will be favorable to the interest of our nation, because we are one of the largest users today in the world just because of our population. 1.2 billion is no mean amount of people who are going to be using it. And as I said, they're saying 35% are already connected on internet, and as you add another 10 years down the line, going to have 60% of the population linked. So I think this is an area where we'll have to look at. I think as far as the technological mandarins are concerned, I think the focus will have to be at 3 levels. You'll have to look at the structural, the reactive, and the proactive. So something which is already there, we'll have to look at reactive measures to be able to ensure security comes in. You'll have to look at the structural basis, which of course, as I said, doesn't work commercially very well. So that's where I think the governmental policy-making bodies will have to ensure that there is a certain amount of support given so that we have inherent security in what you're going to be manufacturing, both in the application, in the software domain, and the hardware domain. And also, I would say, utilize the artificial intelligence and the new disruptive technologies to reduce the involvement of the human in the processing of securing and carrying out the processes in any cyber-affected institution oblique setup or any of the critical infrastructures that we have within the country. So if I had to quickly sum up, may I just say, what would I look at in digital India? What are the challenges? The biggest problem here is 50% of Indians are uneducated and ignorant about online transactions. I was at a particular conference some time back, and I know some of them here are present as well, and they quoted a McCarthy report which said that 92% of Indians share their personal information online, whether it be on their social media, whether it be in the methodology of chatting with each other. So you are not really a security-minded society. And the reason, of course, goes back to our joint families, where you're sharing, you still have this share amongst, as I say, even if you've got a little bit, you share amongst each other. So this habit of being not security-oriented is actually the greatest fallacy. And this is where I think awareness will have to come in to educate the people to start functioning in that manner. We'll have to step out from the compliance-driven security mindset and start the practice of self-regulated security within the organizations. I think this is an area which is a challenge that comes up. The capability to map the risks and then to see what are the future evolving threats will have to be looked at by the technocrats. How to architect our digital security and develop resilience within our system will be another area that will be of interest. I was told the enterprises and citizens in India, by and large, are not adhering to privacy laws. It's like social media, the issue that was talked about. And I was given a figure that out of all the breaches that get reported, 63% of the authorized breaches are through the weak, default, and stolen passwords, and 85% of breaches that happen are still from 10 known vulnerabilities. So you know where the problem is, but you actually put your head down like an ostrich and say, ki ye mere ko nahi hoga, it'll happen to the next guy, is actually the fallacy which needs to be broken up in our society, especially when we are looking at cybersecurity. How do we look at these ways to do it? I think technological sovereignty is somebody who talked about. I think we will have to look at the indigenization in the Make in India, where we are looking at cyber hardware, software, applications, all being done. CDAC had taken out this beautiful operating system called BOSS, which now the Army has adopted partially in certain areas. It is helping us out. I think that's the way to go, that we have our own systems which will provide us the inherent security to our critical structures. We'll have to look at a multi-stakeholder approach. I think in India, I think the biggest problem is all of us function in our own silos. This is an area which doesn't work. You have to look at a multi-stakeholder approach. Look at the Americans, how they started the US Cyber Command. The National Security Advisor and the Cybercom head used to be the same, wear the same hat. So there was cross-pollination. There was people from the academia, people from the industry who came and worked and functioned. So I think we will have to look at organizations like that. We will have to look at security being built around the people, processes, and technology which have got linked. I think all these three will have to be looked at simultaneously. Skill development, which they've talked about, not just basic skills for awareness, but skills to be able to handle the higher end of cybersecurity will actually have to be looked at. As I said, you and I will have to come to the conclusion that cybersecurity is not a technology problem that can be solved. Rather, it is a risk to be managed by a combination of defensive technology, astute analysis, and traditional diplomacy. I think this is where you and I will have to look at it very seriously. And in the end, may I just quickly touch upon some aspects of the military. Being a military mind, and we've also got the chief guest who's the serving head, and he himself is no mean authority, has a great experience in the domain of cyber and communication security, being from the signals and having steered various organizations which came out earlier. But I think where we really need to look at why should, it's not important whether the army or the cyber command is under the army or under A, B, or C. But I think today in India, fortunately, one of the only organizations where there is a hierarchical structure, where there is accountability right up the chain of command, is only in the army. So whether you take it under the umbrella of the army, but structure it something where you can get people from the academia on short-term leaves. It doesn't have to be an organized force which needs to be employed for 365 days. It doesn't have to be a pensionable job that you're looking at. You come in and do a 3-year stint, a 5-year stint, use the latent talent that is available in the large workforce. How many? I think 3 lakh institutions in the country, and you're getting about nearly 3 lakh technical educated workforce that comes into the environment every year. Use these young boys who are vibrant, who have the flair for it, because cyber security, cyber offensive and defensive strategies will require a proper wielding of mindset to be able to do, and doesn't require just knowledge but also the inclination. So correct the right force and please raise it at the earliest that we can. Just to give you an example, we've had last year the reorganization in the Chinese setup where the cyber commanders come. He talks about electronic domination. He looks at the EW, the media which is there, as well as the electronics, the cyber domain being functioned under one. So he's looking at electronic domination of the medium by 2050. Taiwan has raised one, South Korea has a command. US Cybercom, which used to be under the strategic forces, has now been made a full command of in its own rights. So what we are seeing, there is a transition that is happening across the world, and we've got one of the greatest players for carrying out intrusive and creating vulnerabilities and sensitivities is China. And we happen to have a border which is with it, which is not in a very good state. So I think the Indian polity really has to look at it very seriously to raise this particular organization. I would only say, in the end, please, we need to take stock of the shortfalls that exist, which all of us have talked about. What we need to do is, though we have got the policy in place in 2013. We've got the security advisor there in the cyber domain. I mean, very eminently, you can't get a better man like Dr. Gulshan Rai. You've got the NCIPP that has come up. But I think where these regulatory or these principled net points have been, or organizations have been raised, I think we need to give a little more meat by actually laying out a cyber philosophy, a doctrine. We need to see greater transition of seamless integration at various organization level to take it to the next level of security. I think we keep, every day that we talk, we are actually losing time as far as cybersecurity is concerned. So may I only say that at the end, it's a subject which is very important. With the technocrats who are present here, the technical and domain experts who are here, it's always a delight to come and get educated. I've always enjoyed being at any of these forums. I go back very, very knowledgeable at the end of it, very confused also, because then I pick up a book to try and understand all the new terminologies that I hear, and I find that it's like a bottomless well. I think the more you know about it, the more you realize the deeper is the well, and actually we need to take stock of it. And then that note, may I just say that I think in our country, at all levels, whether it's the commercial world, whether it's the policy-making bodies, whether it's the academia, I think greater focus and greater synergy needs to come in. And may I just wish this seminar all the very best for this summit meeting for the next 2 days, all the very best. And delighted to be here, delighted to be associated with all of you, and wish you all a great 2 days of deliberation. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.